everyone, and welcome to Crime in Court. This is the 1993 Menendez brothers trial. We've completed streaming it, and now we are going through some of the court documents, the proceedings that are continuing on in this case. So we are going to pick up where we left off last time, which was the habeas corpus brief that we read through. So we completed that, but now we're going to go through all of the different exhibits. There are several, so but they're short, so this shouldn't be hopefully too long because I got a headache. So let's try to get through this. All right, so this is Exhibit A. It helps if I shrink myself. And this is the letter from Andy. Or I'm sorry, to Andy from Erik Menendez, and this was presumably written about 8 or 9 months before the homicides occurred, because there's reference in here to Christmas, and it would have been, I guess, they figured the Christmas prior to the homicide. So, hello, Andy. How are you doing? I hope better than I am. It's been a long time since we've been in touch. Too long. I wish we could have seen each other during Thanksgiving. Remember, Andy is probably Eric's best friend growing up, and or at least one of his closest friends, and they are very close. He discloses things to Andy about the essay that was going on in his home by the hands of his father. So he admitted things like that to Andy, and he knew about it. And this is corroboration that Andy knew because he talks about it in this letter. And Andy, if you recall, Andy has since passed away. He died of a drug overdose, which I find likely, he may have had some mental health concerns after this whole thing happened with the family, and he wasn't able to do anything to help his cousin out, who I'm sure he loved dearly and didn't want to see in this position. So, and then to have it end up that way, I think it really took a toll on Andy, and that may have led to some of his choices later in life. But anyways, let's continue. Rest in peace, Andy. All right, so we almost did, he said, see each other at Thanksgiving. We almost did. We were all set to go out, and then my parents decided not to at the last minute. Mom said the flights were too expensive. She said we could wait till Christmas, but now they've decided that I'm playing the Fiesta Bowl, and that is not worth it just to play out for a few days, or just to fly out for a few days. I was all excited to see you and some high school buddies, but I'll have to wait a little, I guess. So you can sense his disappointment there that, he wanted to go see his friends because they're living in California at this time, obviously, and his family members, I believe, are back in are they in Pennsylvania, New York? I can't know. I don't know. There were too many homes, but I do know some of the family was also in Illinois. So this might be the Illinois family, but I'm not sure. I think it might be. All right. So whoever wherever they lived, the Canos, it was not in California, and they would have had to flown out to see them. Oh my goodness. My phone's ringing. We're gonna shut that off. It's prescriptions. Okay, sorry about that. So mom and dad had a company party here, and dad had hired people to decorate the whole house and bought a house tree, a whole tree. Yeah, that's the wrong kind of hole. That's why. Okay, he bought a whole tree that they brought down from Santa Barbara. Actually, they had to bring three since mom didn't like the way the first one looked. They were pissed. Wow. They had to bring three down from Santa Barbara because Mrs. Menendez did not like the way they were. So she just didn't like the way they looked. Maybe she was a little difficult to please. Huh? Might be. I don't know. Three different Christmas trees. So they also decorated the tree. Where's the Christmas spirit in that? So the parents decorated the tree, or the people that brought it had the people that brought it down. They brought down from Santa Barbara. I don't know. So maybe they paid people to bring them down a tree from Santa Barbara. They also decorated it. I remember when Lyle and I used to decorate it. Yeah, see, they don't even get to do fun things anymore. Times change, huh? At least I got to put up my own stocking and are for, I can't read this, and something for Rudy and Velvet, who are 5, by the way. Maybe those are pets. Oh, maybe he, that's supposed to be a 1. So he says, at least I got to put up my own stocking and one for Rudy and Velvet, who I don't know who those are, but I'm assuming pets, maybe some dogs, since they weren't allowed to have a rabbit. Remember, Jose killed Lyle's rabbit that he brought home from school one day. Just, yeah, terrible things. But, anyways, so that might be some pets that he was talking about there. Mom isn't doing too good. It's like she's here physically, but mentally she's past. Like, I really should have read this first. This is hard to read. She's just like gone, if you know what I mean. She's just like gone, if you know what I mean. She freaks out over nothing. I feel bad for her. I don't know why she puts up with dad's shit. At times, I wish I could talk to her about things, someday, especially dad and I. But the way she worships him and tells him everything, so afraid she'll tell him whatever I say. I just can't risk it. So he wants to talk to his mom about what's going on with him. He doesn't think that she knows at this point, at least it doesn't appear that he knows that she does know because she did know, which she revealed to him the night of the homicide. So Lyle got in a huge fight with her, meaning the mother, over why we couldn't spend Christmas with the rest of the family. And mom freaked out and said if we wanted to go, we could go alone. I just don't know why she wants to hurt him like that. Oh, he could go alone. She said if he wants to go, he could go alone. I just don't know why she wants to hurt him like that. Lyle wanted to stay, but dad wouldn't let him. So, what is that word? So I'm stuck here alone. I've been trying to avoid dad. It's still happening, Andy, but it's worse for me now. I can't explain it. He's so overweight that I can't stand to see him. I never know when it's going to happen, and it's driving me crazy. Every night I stay up thinking he might come in. I need to put it out of my mind. I know what you said before, but I'm afraid. You just don't know Dad like I do. He's crazy. He warned me 100 times about telling anyone, especially Lyle, and am I a serious wumpus? Wimpus? I don't know. I don't know. I'll make it through. I can handle it, Andy. I need to stop thinking about it. Anyway, I hope you're doing good. How's your new girlfriend? Allison, I think that's us. She sounds pretty great. When do I get to meet her? I can see why you don't want to leave Puerto Rico. Haha, I think. I hear you're playing a lot of soccer. That's great. I love soccer. Too bad I had to something. I don't know. How many tap ups can you do? Oh, too bad he quit. How many tap ups can you do? So he quit soccer. and some a tap up must be some kind of exercise. I'm glad to see that schools I'm glad to see that school's easy for you. Sounds a little too easy though. Are you learning? Next year's the important year. 11th grade transcripts are what colleges look at. I'm doing okay so far with school. My tennis gets in the way some because his father made him play tennis 24/7. But next year is an important year. Uh I think of I really do well. I think if I really do well on tennis, something dad will see this is will ease off some. Something if he does well in tennis, maybe dad will ease off some just in time for me to start college at Brown or Berkeley. Anyways, I'm playing great. We really like our new coach, Mark. That's Mark Heffernan. He testified. He seemed to really be a nice guy and seemed to really understand that there was something very wrong with Jose and the way he treated his sons. He beat Lyle 6-0 the first set they played. It was so bad Lyle even had to laugh. Well, I'm going to go, buddy. If getting it's getting late and I don't feel well, keep in touch. Hopefully, I'll see you soon. Until then, God bless you and Merry Christmas. For the Christmas to be, I miss you. Love E. And then so the Christmas trees for the Christmas to be, and the snowman's for the Christmas to come. So there you go. Um, yeah, it's pretty telling. Pretty telling, especially, back then when we couldn't text one another and all you had was that note, and especially if you didn't live near one another and you had to actually put it in an envelope, mail it, wait for a return. I mean, this would take weeks. And you waited because you wanted that, that was the only form of communication we had. We didn't have the internet and texting and email. So this was it for all of you younger folk out there that don't understand life without technology. And so the things that were important to you, that's what you were putting in your letters to your friends, your family, your boyfriend who was away at college, things like that. So the things that were really important on your mind at that time, that's what went into your letters. So it's very telling what's missing in Eric's life right now. First of all, he's missing his friends and his family. He's missing his cousin, his close connection that he had with his cousin, and some friends that he had made in the past that are no longer in the same state. And you can obviously tell that he is still very stressed about his father coming into his room. It You can get a sense of he feels like he has to walk on eggshells, like he's tense. I just feel like that fight or flight moment, when you're like, oh my God, is it going to happen? Is something going to jump out at me in the scary dark? And that's probably like that's how I picture him at night, waiting. Is it going to happen? Is it going to happen? And then stressing yourself so that you can't even sleep, and then just becoming a huge cycle of stress, anxiety, and just horrific, um, just a horrific way to live. So you can sense that from his letter. Also, something that's telling is he can't wait for his senior year to be over so he can go to college, because that's another thing that he points out. So these were all things that were very important to Eric growing up, were his cousins, his family, his close friends that he had relationships with, which there weren't that many because his parents didn't allow him to go and socialize. They didn't allow him to have friends. So most of his friends were cousins. That's how the cousins would come over and stay with them. So those were their social activities. because the parents didn't allow it other than tennis, which, it was either tennis or swimming or whatever. So, yeah, so that's reading through it in its entirety. You can really tell, I think, the important things that were on Eric's mind at that time. It's not dated, but we know because it's Christmas, we know it had to have been that it had to have been around Christmas time. The homicides took place August 20th, 1989. So this would have been before Christmas and right after Thanksgiving when he wrote this letter in 88 is what they are claiming for it to be. All right, so let's move on to Exhibit B. This is and it's an affidavit from Eric. So I, Eric Galen Menendez, declare I am one of the defendants in People versus Menendez. I was convicted of 2 counts of homicide after a trial in 1995 because I was indigent. I was represented by appointed counsel at trial. When I appealed my convictions, the Court of Appeal appointed counsel to represent me. I am still indigent. I do not have money to hire counsel or fund a habeas investigation. There is usually between 200 and 300 in my inmate account. So uh, that's probably from family and friends and people that support him on the outside. Um, Probably a lot of that because you can't make a whole lot of money in prison. Even if you do have a job in prison and you're making like pennies to, compared to like what everybody else makes and to what everything in your commissary is worth. So it's really kind of stupid. But um and what was I gonna say? Oh, despite everybody saying that they did these crimes for the money, as you can see, they are indigent, which means that they don't have money. So they can't work. They've been in prison for 35 years now almost, and they haven't had the ability to financially support themselves. So obviously they are still indigent, and all of the money that they did inherit in after the crime, after the homicides, has been used in their defense. So that was pretty much, I think, wiped out after the first trial or during the trial. Even I'm not even sure, but it was definitely thoroughly used up. All right. Number four, Andy Cano was my cousin and was one of my closest family members and friends growing up. Andy was the son of my aunt, Marta Cano. Andy died some years ago around 2003. In 2015, I heard something about a letter I had written to Andy in December of 1988. I heard about a Barbara Walters special in 2015 or 2016 covering our case. I did not see the special, but heard that she talked about a letter I had written to Andy, which had been offered into evidence at the trial, but was excluded. I did not recall all the evidence that was either admitted or ruled inadmissible at my 2 trials, but because my understanding was that Ms. Walters said the letter had been offered and excluded at trial, it never occurred to me that the letter could be considered new evidence. Oh, but it was. Sometime between February and April of 2018, my brother Lyle and I were put in the same prison. Yay, they were reunited. Lyle advised me that he had been told his trial lawyer from the first trial, Jill Lansing, said she had no recollection of any such letter being offered at trial and excluded. He said that he then contacted his appointed appellate lawyer, Cliff Gardner, who said, isn't that who's also still on their appeal? I think that's, yeah, Cliff Gardner is, so it's Mark Garagos and Cliff Gardner who filed the habeas. So Cliff is still his appellate lawyer. So when he contacted his appellate lawyer, Cliff Gardner, he said that he knew nothing about such a letter and would try and contact Lyle's trial lawyers from the second trial to see if they recalled such a letter. Lyle later told me that Mr. Gardner had contacted Lyle's trial counsel from the second trial who also had no recollection of having seen such a letter. Lyle said that Mr. Gardner advised him to try and get a copy of that letter. Lyle asked journalist Robert Rand. I've talked about him on this stream before. I've been following him on X. He was a journalist that covered extensively this case, and he really dived into it. And he gave the brothers more of a um, he was more benign in the way that he treated the case and the way that he reported the case. He was more objective. He gave the brothers a lot more grace than a lot of the other reporters at the time. So he got up close and personal, I believe, with the family, which is how he ended up finding this letter. So Lyle asked journalist Robert Rand, who has covered the case for many years and knew my Aunt Marta, to see if he could get a copy of the letter. I was later told that Aunt Marta gave Mr. Rand a letter Andy had received from me, and Mr. Rand gave a copy of that letter to the appellate attorney, Mr. Gardner. Lyle told me, after seeing the letter, Mr. Gardner said he did not recall having seen it before, but to make sure the evidence was indeed new evidence and had not been offered and excluded at trial, as Ms. Walters had said in her 2015 special, Mr. Gardner advised Lyle to review the transcripts from both trials to see if this evidence had actually been offered. That's weird that he made Lyle do it, but I guess if you want to get it done fast and in a timely way, you're sitting in prison, you got time, whereas your lawyer doesn't have all the time in the world all day to sift through transcripts. So I guess it's a way to do it. It is a way to do it, not necessarily the way, but all right. So they made Lyle go through the transcripts from both trials to see if the evidence had actually been offered. This presented a problem. Neither Lyle nor I had copies of the transcripts from either trial. Speaking of, let me break off here for just a second. I did find transcripts to the second trial. I will be reading through some things. There's a lot, as you probably are aware. It went on for nearly 7 months. So I'm not reading 7 months worth of transcripts, and trust me, I'm sure you don't want me reading through all of them either. But I will pick through certain things. We'll go through like opening and closings, obviously, I think are important, and we can go through some major testimony, maybe if there's, I'll look through the prosecution and the defense. And I believe Erik did testify, so we'll go through and maybe read some of his testimony if Erik testified. Um, and maybe compare the difference of how his testimony differs from trial one to trial two. So, yeah, so we'll go through some of it, but I am not promising all of it. But I will give you all of the transcripts. I am in the process of putting together some Google Drive folders with all of these documents. I will give you the link for all of these exhibits for yourself to look through and the habeas corpus. So I'll give that to you in this episode also. But in future episodes for all the transcripts and stuff, I will make them available to you in some Google Docs. But give me some time. I got to get that ready. Anyways, so they didn't have the transcripts from either trial. But sometime in 2020, Court TV posted on its website transcripts of the second trial and a video of the first trial. It turns out that Ms. Walters made a mistake, and my letter to Andy had not been offered and excluded at either trial. So this was, in fact, new evidence. Lyle told me that he had been told by Mr. Rand, or that he had been told that Mr. Rand had many audio taped interviews conducted with witnesses at my trial and that he was in the process of transcribing. Lyle said that Gardner told him that generally state habeas petitioners get one shot at habeas relief, and that in order to present all potential claims in one petition, we should wait until Mr. Rand had transcribed these interviews. In that way, we could determine if there was any additional new evidence. While waiting for these transcripts to be made or to be completed, I learned that producers of the documentary involving Menudo, a boy band formed in Puerto Rico, had approached Gardner with new information. In November 2022, I was told that a former member of the band had come forward to say that my father had R'd him. I have a vague recollection of meeting some members of the band when I was a boy and when my family lived in New Jersey. So they were in Jersey, and later on, he also was. Ooh, sorry, didn't mean to knock the mic out. Um, so they lived in. He signed them. He signed Roy to RCA when they were still living in New Jersey, but by the time they were back in Beverly Hills, he was still having Roy come and visit him on occasion. All right, so I am now 52 years old. My senior year of high school was the 1988 to 1989 school year. I would have entered college in the fall of 89. Man, he was so close to going to college. But as we know, Jose was never going to let him get away. All right, so this next exhibit is a letter from Erik Menendez to Andy. Or this is an email in response to the letter to Andy Cano by Erik. So this is from Robert Rand, 4/10/2018, to manager of the UPS store. Second of two documents to Cliff Gardner, attorney, from Marta M. Cano regarding letter from Erik Menendez to son Andy Cano. Date April 10th, 2018. On March 21st, 2018, I was going through paperwork of my son Andre Cano, who died in January 2003. I discovered the original copy of a letter which I believe Erik Menendez wrote to my son Andy in December 1988. I have turned this letter over to Robert Rand and asked him to hand deliver it to you at your office in Berkeley, California. That is signed Marta Menendez Cano. She put her information there and signed, and yeah. So and it's signed by a notary public as well. So it's an official affidavit coming from Marta Cano and giving permission to hand deliver something to an attorney. All right, next is Exhibit D, which is Cliff Gardner's declaration. He says, I, Cliff Gardner, declare I am a lawyer licensed to practice in California because Lyle Menendez was indigent. In September of 1996, I was appointed to represent him on appeal in People versus Menendez. I have not represented Lyle Menendez since 2005. Okay, so he's not a current appellate attorney because, as we know, their appeals were exhausted. So I guess that makes him no longer an appellate attorney. All right, so at some point in early 2018, I was told about a letter Erik Menendez wrote to his cousin Andy Cano, a letter that had been offered into evidence and excluded. I do not recall how I learned about this. Although I had read the trial record many years earlier when I represented Lyle on appeal and in subsequent federal habeas proceedings, I did not recall such a letter having been offered and excluded. I contacted Terry Towery, one of Lyle's trial attorneys, and asked if she had ever heard of this letter. She had not. I advised Mr. Menendez to get a copy of the letter if he could. During the course of my representation, I met Robert Rand, a journalist who had covered the two trials. In April of 2018, Mr. Rand provided me with a letter he had obtained from Marta Cano, Andy's mother. A copy of that letter is attached to this declaration. Mr. Rand also told me that he had numerous tape recorded interviews, in the hundreds as I recall, some with people who were called as witnesses and some with people who were never called, from his years of working on the case, and he was having these interviews transcribed to see if there was any additional evidence in the case. After reading the letter from Erik to Andy, I still did not have any recollection of such a letter ever having been offered at trial. But because my memory of the trial record many years old, I advised Lyle Menendez to review the records from the two trials. That's why, because he was no longer the appellate attorney. So that's why he told Lyle to look at the transcripts. So he advised Lyle to review the records from the two trials to see if the letter had been offered into evidence but excluded by the trial judge. Given the content of the letter, if the evidence had not been offered and excluded, it might qualify as new evidence on which a habeas petition could be based. Assuming the evidence was new, and in light of Mr. Rand's statement that he was having his witness interviews transcribed, I advised Lyle Menendez that California courts looked with disfavor upon piecemeal presentation of habeas claims in a series of habeas petitions, and to avoid piecemeal presentation of any future claims which might arise should these transcriptions reveal relevant evidence that had not presented at trial, it would be best to wait until the transcriptions were completed before pursuing a round of habeas relief. So that makes sense, and he's attesting to the fact that, yes, I did give him that advice to wait. So in November of 2022, I learned that during an interview for a documentary, Roy Rossello, a member of the boy band Menudo, admitted that he had been essayed by Jose Menendez. And that is signed on the 24th day of April in 2023 by Cliff Gardner. Moving on. All right, so we are on Exhibit E, which basically is just trying to figure out how to move. There we go. Okay. So this is an article, obviously, from something. It doesn't say the actual publication, but it says Menudo signs long-term RCA pact. So basically, this is when Menudo signed, and this talks about Roy Rossello and when this. Well, I can't even read that, but you can see that they did sign with RCA. I don't know. Oh, that's what I was looking for was the date. This was Wednesday, November 23rd, 1983 is when RCA Records and Jose Menendez signed Menudo to their record label. So there you go. It calls for 12 albums in 6 years, excluding potential movie soundtracks, blah, 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 blah. Doing some agreements with Kenny Rogers and Diana Ross. There you go. Um, yeah. So that's all. It was just an article to support, I guess, that happened when it did. All right, so next is Exhibit F. No, G, F. I was right. All right. And this is Roy Rossello's affidavit. Roy Rossello, declare, I was born on May 1st, 1969 in Puerto Rico. In 1983, I joined the Puerto Rican singing group Menudo. Menudo was a boy band formed by Eduardo Diaz in the late 1970s. I was with the group until 1986. So it signed in 83. He was with it until 86. In the fall of 1983 or 84, the group was performing in New York. I recall that this was shortly before the time that Eduardo Diaz signed a recording contract with RCA for the group. One evening at the hotel, Mr. Diaz told me I would be having dinner with Jose Menendez, who was an RCA executive. Diaz said I was going to do a favor, in quotes, and do something great, in quotes, for Menudo and for him. I was taken in a limousine to Jose's house. As I recall, it was in New Jersey. Jose Menendez was in the limousine, as was Eduardo Diaz. And we do know that they did live in New Jersey at some point in time. So that jives with their timeline. After arriving at the Menendez home, I saw one of his boys sitting behind the front door. I was directed to the dining room. Another boy was at the dining room table. Neither of the boys said anything to me. Jose Menendez was there, along with his wife, as was Eduardo Diaz. Jose Menendez offered me a glass of wine at the table. Mind you, he's a minor. He's underage. So he's not even 21, let alone, 18 to be consenting to things that he's about to do. So Jose Menendez offered me a glass of wine at the table and told me it was expensive wine, so I should drink the entire glass. I felt sick after drinking it. Things looked blurry, and I felt like I could not move. Do we think he drugged him, potentially? I was partially pushed and partially carried down a hallway. I felt like I had no control over my body. Drugged? Roofied? Something? Jose took me to a room. He closed the door. I could not move my body. He put me into a bed. I felt him take off my pants. I felt him penetrate me in the rear end. I think that I told him I did not want to do this, but he continued to R me in the anus very hard anyways. I recalled being carried back to the limousine. Later, I woke up in the hotel where the group was staying. I was bleeding from the anus. I was in pain for a week. The pain was unbearable. Eduardo Diaz said I would be better soon, and this was normal. I accused Diaz of selling my body to Jose Menendez. He told me not to mention this to anyone. This was not my only sexual experience with Jose Menendez. I recall a time Menudo was performing in New York. I think we were at Radio City Music Hall. Before the show, Eduardo Diaz told me to meet Jose Menendez in the bathroom for oral sex. When I went to the bathroom, fans were already in the audience screaming. I recall Jose Menendez telling me that the fans were screaming because he had made the group famous. Jose Menendez then orally copulated me. After that show, Eduardo Diaz said he had a last favor to ask. He asked me to go with Jose Menendez to a hotel. I went with Jose Menendez in a limousine to a hotel. It was not the hotel the group was staying at. I do not recall the name of the hotel, but I do recall that it was old-fashioned. Jose Menendez took me to a room and told me he was going to arm me slowly so it did not hurt. He put me on the bed, took my pants off, put saliva on my anus, and penetrated me. When he was done arming me, he took me back to my hotel afterwards. He opened the door to the limousine and said goodbye. I declare under penalty of perjury that the foregoing is true and current. Executed 4/10/2023 in April of 2023. And that was signed by Roy Rossello. And yeah, I believe that he said in the documentary, the Menendez documentary, that there were instances that also took place in the Beverly Hills home. But maybe I'm wrong about that because this is only talking about New York and New Jersey, but I could have sworn, but whatever. All right. So, anyways, because I've said that on my show before that it happened in the Beverly Hills home. I believe it did, but don't sue me if I'm wrong. All right, so next, this is second to the last. So I told you there were a lot of exhibits. So this is Exhibit G, and this is just a listing of the entire docket. We're not going to read through all of this, but it has to do with all of the appeals, everything that has been ordered in this case, all of it. So it's quite a long, lengthy docket. So obviously we're not going to read through it, but ugh, that was just added to the record. All right, so Exhibit H, moving on. This is a affidavit from Joseph Lyle Menendez, who declares, I am one of the defendants in People versus Joseph Lyle Menendez and Erik Galen Menendez. I was convicted of 2 counts of homicide after a trial in 1995. Because I was indigent, I was represented by the Los Angeles County Public Defender's Office. I appealed my conviction. Because I was indigent, the Court of Appeals appointed counsel to represent me. I am still indigent. I do not have money to hire counsel or fund a habeas investigation. There is approximately $50 currently in my inmate account. Andy Cano was my cousin. Andy was the son of my aunt, Marta Cano. Andy died some years ago, around 2003. In 2015, I first heard something about a letter my brother Erik had written to Andy when they were younger. There was a Barbara Walters special about our case in 2015, and the special covered a letter which Erik had written to Andy. Ms. Walters said this letter was presented by our lawyers at trial, but ruled inadmissible by the judge. And there's a YouTube link to refer them to, which I'm assuming probably goes to the Barbara Walters interview. Although I did not recall all of the evidence that was either admitted or ruled inadmissible at my 2 trials, because the report said the letter had been offered and excluded at trial, it never occurred to me that the letter could be considered new evidence. I gave it no more thought. In early 2018, I was advised that my trial counsel, Jill Lansing, had said she had no recollection of any such letter being offered at trial and excluded. I contacted Cliff Gardner, who had been appointed to represent me on appeal years earlier. Mr. Gardner had not heard of any such letter and said he would contact my trial lawyers from the second trial to see if they recalled such a letter. Some time later, Mr. Gardner informed me that he had spoken with Terry Towery, and she had no recollection of having seen such a letter, much less having offered it into evidence. Mr. Gardner advised me to try and get a copy of the letter. Robert Rand is a journalist who has continued to cover this case since well before the first trial, and whom I have known for some time. Mr. Rand has continued to investigate the case and has written a book about the case as well. In the course of his investigation, he was spoken with and he knows my Aunt Marta. I asked Mr. Rand to see if he could obtain a copy of the letter. In April of 2018, Mr. Rand informed me that he had been in touch with Marta Cano, my aunt. My understanding is that Aunt Marta came across some of Andy's papers and gave Mr. Rand a letter Andy had received from Erik. That same month, Mr. Rand gave a copy of this letter to Cliff Gardner. After seeing this letter, Mr. Gardner explained that he did not recall ever seeing this letter before. But because it had been so long since he had reviewed transcripts from the trials, and to make sure the evidence was indeed new evidence and had not in fact been offered and excluded as the 2015 Barbara Walters special had indicated, he advised me to review the transcripts from both trials to see if the evidence had actually been offered. At that point, I was stymied. I no longer had a copy of the transcripts from either trial. I tried various places to obtain a copy of the transcripts without success. In late 2020, Court TV posted on its website a transcript of the second trial and a video of the first trial. Because I did not have access to the internet, my wife and other family members reviewed this material and we concluded that the letter was indeed new evidence and had not been offered and excluded at either trial. Mr. Gardner advised me that Mr. Rand had informed him that he was in the process of transcribing hundreds of audio taped interviews that he had conducted with witnesses at my trial. Mr. Gardner explained that California courts frown on petitioners presenting habeas claims in piecemeal fashion, that is, in separate habeas petitions filed one after another. He suggested waiting until Mr. Rand completed these transcriptions before pursuing habeas relief. In this way, I was advised we could avoid a piecemeal presentation of habeas claims should these transcriptions reveal any new evidence that had not been presented at trial. And I want to jump in here and say, who cares if it's piecemeal? Who cares if the Supreme Courts get multiple requests? Because if I'm sitting in prison and I've got some kind of evidence that's going to potentially get me a new trial or get me out, I'm going to want to put that in front of the Supreme Court way sooner than, having to sit there and wait and wait and wait and wait, which it seems like they did. They had this information back in 2018. They didn't really know it was a thing until a little later, but even after that, they still had to sit and wait for more things to happen before they could file for relief, which is so stupid because if you're sitting in prison unjustly or unfairly, don't you think you should be able to request that relief when you want out? But I guess not. Our system, sometimes I think the way things are is just so messed up. In this way, I was advised we would avoid the piecemeal presentation of habeas claims should these transcriptions reveal any new evidence that had not been presented at trial. While waiting for the transcriptions to be completed, I learned that producers of a documentary involving Menudo, a boy band that was formed in Puerto Rico, had approached Mr. Gardner with new information they believed was relevant to my case. In November 2022, I was told that a former member of the band had come forward to say that my father had essayed him. I declare under penalty of perjury that the foregoing is true and correct, executed this 29th day of March in San Diego, California, signed by Lyle Menendez. And as you can see, all of these affidavits corroborate one another. Like, it's just backing more and more evidence on top to corroborate that these things happened. All right, so this final affidavit here is from Robert Rand. So this is the final piece of all of these exhibits. All right, so I, Robert Rand, declared, I am a journalist. I have covered the Menendez case since it began years ago. Attached, as attachment one to this declaration, is a photograph of live entertainment employees at a Christmas party held at the Menendez home in Beverly Hills in the winter of 1988. Live Entertainment was the company which Jose Menendez worked at in 88 and 89. I can authenticate this as a photograph taken at the Beverly Hills Menendez home because I visited the home on a number of occasions to interview members of the family. I recognize the staircase. In my work reporting on the Menendez brothers case, I spoke with numerous employees of Live Entertainment who were at the party. One of them provided the photograph attached as attachment 1. All explained that this was a Christmas party held in December 1988. In addition, there is Christmas garland on the banner. I declare under penalty of perjury that the foregoing is true and correct, executed this 21st day of April in Berkeley, California, signed by Robert Rand. This is not the greatest of photos, but that is hold on. There we go. So this is a Menendez home. He's just corroborating that that is a picture taken at their home. You can't really see faces, but there you go. So there you have it. Those are all of the exhibits. I will, like I said, share the link down in the description below where to look up and find all of these. I'll share a Google Drive folder with you guys so you can go and look at them anytime you want to. I'm going to start using Google Drive as a repository, so anytime I'm reading from something, you guys can find it somewhere. So I think that that's, I always like to read along. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. I thought it was good reading through their words, the from their own mouths that they've signed and said, this is true. This is my explanation of, or my recollection of the events of that day. So, all said and done, everybody's affidavits all together, I think, corroborate it, and they have a good case, I think, to prove that this is new evidence, whether it gets them a new trial or their convictions thrown out. I don't know, but it's I always think that defendants have a good case, but I'm always wrong because the justice system comes back and disappoints very often. But we were not going to give up the fight. We're going to continue to fight for justice for Erik and Lyle and to hopefully get them free. Um, just a little note for you guys. Next week, I am heading into surgery on my hip. I don't know if I'm going to be feeling up to recording. I'm going to try to get you an episode for Tuesday, at least, at the very least. But and plan that ahead. But if not, then I apologize. I will get it to. I'll get the next episodes to you when I can, because sitting up might be a little bit of a challenge. However, maybe we could do some voiceovers. But coming up, we have I'm trying to remember all of the different things that we do have. So we will go through the request for a resentencing. That is from the defense, filed that motion to resentence them. And then there's also an amicus curiae, which is basically it's like a third party coming in saying, here's some information, judge, that you might want to take judicial notice of before you make a decision in this case. So that's there's some, I want to say, like the American Psychological Association or some of those kinds of acronyms put forth in amicus curiae brief, which basically means here's some information that you might not know and that you might want to take into consideration, judge. And so we'll read through that too, which might be interesting. It's more probably about precedent and case law, but it will be relevant, obviously, and it will be interesting to read through. So I will hope to get those episodes recorded for you soon. Like I said, I did get the transcripts for trial two. We won't go through all of them, but we'll go through some of them. Definitely the opening and closings, because I think those are really important, and then maybe some key witnesses, but probably not too many. But I will provide those also. So keep an eye open for those as well. Thank you so, so much for watching, for reading along with me, and for just being here, being you. And let me know if there's any, you know what, maybe I'll do like a poll and I'll poll you guys and whoever, and that's how we'll narrow down whose testimony we'll read from trial two. I'll come up with that. So keep an eye out for that as well. All right. I will see you guys later. Thank you so much and take care. Please hit the like button on the way out for me if you don't mind. Take care. Bye, guys.